Let me put a quote to you from the book, where you say there are whole disciplines in universities forthrightly hostile towards men. These are the areas of study dominated by the postmodern stroke neo-Marxist claim that Western culture in particular is an oppressive structure created by white men to dominate and exclude women. But then I want to put
minorities too dominate and exclude
minorities and women. But I want to put to you that here in the UK, for example, let's take that as an example, the gender pay gap stands at just over 9%. You've got women at the BBC recently saying that the broadcaster is illegally paying them less than men to do the same job. You've got only 7 women running the top FTSE 100 companies.
Yeah.
So it seems to a lot of women that they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
It does seem that way, but multivariate analysis of the pay gap indicate that it doesn't exist.
But that's just not true, is it?
That's
I mean, that 9%
true.
pay gap, that's a gap between median hourly earnings between men and women.
But there's
that exists.
Yeah, but there's multiple reasons for that. One of them is gender, but it's not the only reason. Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis. Like you say, well, women in aggregate are paid less than men. Okay, well, then we break it down by age, we break it down by occupation, we break it down by interest, we break it down by personality.
But you're saying basically it doesn't matter if women aren't getting to the top, because that's what's skewing that gender pay gap, isn't it? You're saying, well, that's just a fact of life. Women aren't necessarily going to get to the top.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter either.
You're saying it's a fact of life.
There are multiple reasons for it.
Yeah, but those reasons, why should women put up with those reasons? Why should women be content
I'm not
not
saying
to
that
get
they
to the
should
top?
put up with it. I'm saying that the claim that the wage gap between men and women is only due to sex is wrong, and it is wrong. There's no doubt about that. The multivariate analysis have been done. So
well,
I can give you an example.
You keep on talking about multivariate analysis.
Let me give you an example.
I'm saying that 9% pay gap exists.
Yeah.
That's a gap between men and women. I'm not saying why it exists, but it exists. Now, if you're a woman, that seems pretty unfair.
You have to say why it exists.
But do you agree that it's unfair? If you're a woman...
Not necessarily.
And on average, you're getting paid 9% less than a man. That's not fair, is it?
It depends on why it's happening. I can give you an example. Okay. There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. And agreeable people get paid less than less agreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men.
Again, a vast generalization. Some women are not more agreeable than men.
Yes, that's true, but that's right. And some women get paid more than men.
So you were saying that by and large, women are too agreeable to get the pay rises they deserve.
No, I'm saying that that's one component of a multivariate equation that predicts salary. It accounts for maybe 5% of the variance, something like that.
So surely
you need about another 18 factors, one of which is gender. And there is prejudice, there's no doubt about that, but it accounts for a much smaller proportion of the variance in the pay gap than the radical feminists claim.
Okay, so rather than denying the pay gap exists, which is what you did at the beginning of this conversation, shouldn't you say to women, rather than being agreeable and not asking for a pay rise, go and ask for a pay rise? Make yourself disagreeable with your boss.
Oh, definitely, there's that. But I also didn't deny it existed. I denied that it existed because of gender.
Okay.
See, because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
So the pay gap exists, you accept that, but you're saying, I mean, the pay gap between men and women exists, but you're saying it's not because of gender, it's because women are too agreeable to ask for pay rises. So
it's one of the reasons.
Okay, one of the reasons. So why not get them to ask for a pay rise?
I've done that many, many times in my career.
And they just
I've counseled. Oh, they do it all the time. So one of the things that you do as a clinical psychologist is assertiveness training. So you might say, often you treat people for anxiety, you treat them for depression. And maybe the next most common category after that would be assertiveness training. And so I've had many, many women, extraordinarily competent women in my clinical and consulting practice. And we put together strategies for their career development that involve continual pushing, competing for higher wages, and often tripled their wages within a 5-year period, teaching them how to negotiate.
That?
Of course.
So do you agree that you would be happy if that pay gap was eliminated completely? Because that's all the radical feminists are saying.
It would depend on how it was eradicated and how the disappearance of it was measured.
And you're saying if it's at the cost of men, that's a problem?
Oh, there's all sorts of things that it could be at the cost of. It could even be at the cost of women's own interests. So
because they might not be happy if they get equal pay.
No, because it might interfere with other things that are causing the pay gap that women are choosing to do.
Like having children.
Well, or choosing careers that actually happen to be paid less, which women do a lot of.
But why shouldn't women have the right to choose not to have children or the right to choose those demanding careers?
They do. They can. Yeah, that's fine.
But you're saying that makes them unhappy, by and large.
I'm saying no, I'm not saying that. And I actually haven't said that so far.
You're saying it makes them miserable.
No, I said that what was making them miserable was having weak partners. That makes them miserable.
Right.
I would say that many women around the age of, I would say between 28 and 32, have a career family crisis that they have to deal with. And I think that's partly because of the foreshortened time frame that women have to contend with. Like, women have to get the major pieces of their life put together faster than men, which is also partly why men aren't under so much pressure to grow up. So because for the typical woman, she has to have her career and family in order pretty much by the time she's 35, because otherwise the options start to run out. And so that puts a tremendous amount of stress on women, especially at the end of their 20s.
I think I take issue with the idea of the typical woman because, all women are different. And that's what I want to just put another quote to you from the book.
Well, they're different in some ways and the same in others.
Okay, you say women become more vulnerable when they have children.
Oh, yes.
And you talked in one of your YouTube interviews about crazy harpy sisters. So, simple question. Is gender equality a myth in your view? Is that something that's just never going to happen?
It depends on what you mean by equality. No,
Being
if you mean
fairly,
men and women,
getting the same opportunities?
fairly, we could get to a point where people were treated fairly or more fairly. I mean, people are treated pretty fairly in Western culture already, but we can improve
They're really
that.
not, though, are they? I mean, otherwise, why
depends
would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK? Why would there still be a pay gap, which we've
well,
discussed
that's
at length?
That's easy
Why
to
are
answer
women
that
at the
question.
BBC saying that they're getting paid illegally less than men to do the same job?
Well,
That's not fair, is
let's
it?
go to the first question. Those are complicated questions. Seven women, repeat that one. There's
7
only
women running the top FTSE 100 companies in the UK.
Okay. Well, the
I
first
that's not
question
fair.
might be, why would you want to do that?
Why would a man want to do it? I
Well,
mean, there's a lot of money.
there's
It's an interesting
There's a
job.
certain number of men, although not that many, who are perfectly willing to sacrifice virtually all of their life to the pursuit of a high-end career. So they'll work. These are men that are very intelligent. They're usually very, very conscientious. They're very driven. They're very high energy. They're very healthy. And they're willing to work 70 or 80 hours a week, nonstop, specialized at one thing to get to the top.
So you're saying women are just more sensible. They don't want that because it's not a nice life.
I'm saying that's part of it, definitely. And so I work
So you don't think there are barriers in their way that prevent them getting to the top of those
there are
companies?
some barriers, yeah, like men, for example. I mean, to get to the top of any organization is an incredibly competitive enterprise. And the men that you're competing with are simply not going to roll over and say, please take the position.
So let me come back to my
absolute
question.
all-out warfare.
Is gender equality a myth?
I don't know what you mean by the question. Men and women aren't the same, and they won't be the same. That doesn't mean they can't be treated fairly.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it means equality of outcome, then almost certainly it's undesirable. That's already been demonstrated in Scandinavia. Because in Scandinavia...
What do you mean by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable?
Well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it of their own accord. I've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law. Those are ineradicable differences. You can eradicate them with tremendous social pressure and tyranny, but if you leave men and women to make their own choices, you will not get equal outcomes.
Right, so you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen.
Only if they're aiming at equality of outcome.
So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine.
It's not only fine, it's eminently desirable for everyone, for individuals and for society.
But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really saying.
It depends on your measurement techniques. They're doing just fine in medicine. In fact, there are far more female physicians than there are male physicians. There are lots of disciplines that are absolutely dominated by women. Many, many disciplines. And they're doing great. So
Let me put something else to you from the book. You say the introduction of the equal pay for equal work argument immediately complicates even salary comparison beyond practicality for one simple reason. Who decides what work is equal? It's not possible. So the simple question is, do you believe in equal pay?
Well, I made the argument there. It's like it depends on
So
who
you don't
defines
believe
it.
in equal pay?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Because a lot of people listening to you will just say, I mean, are we going back to the dark
That's
ages
because they're actually
here?
not listening. They're
I'm
just
listening very
projecting
carefully,
what
and
they
I'm
think.
hearing you basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms, equal outcomes is how you defined it.
No, I didn't
If
say
I was
that.
a young
said
woman
that equal...
watching that, I would go, well, I might as well just go and play with my Cindy dolls and give
didn't
up
say
trying
that.
at school because I'm not going to get the top job I want because
said
there's
that
someone sitting there saying it's not possible and it's not desirable, it's going to make you miserable.
Desirable. That's what I said. It's a
Yeah,
bad
it's not
social
desirable.
goal. I didn't say that women shouldn't be striving for the top or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second.
Striving for the top, but you're going to put all those hurdles in their way, as has been in their way for centuries, and that's fine. You're saying that's fine.
No, I really
The
think
patriarchal system
I really
is
think
just
that's
fine.
silly. I do. I think that's silly. I really do. I mean, look at your situation. You're hardly unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I have
How do you
battled quite
manage
hard
it?
to get where I've got to.
Exactly. Good
So
for
that's
you.
okay. Battling is good. This is all
It's
about the fight.
inevitable.
But you talk about men fighting. I mean, let me just put another thing to you from the book.
Why
You're
wouldn't
saying
you have to
real...
battle for a high-quality position?
Well, I notice in your book you talk about real conversations between men containing, quote, an underlying threat of physicality.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
What about real conversations between women? Is that something, or are we sort of too amenable and reasonable?
No, it's just that the domain of physical conflict is sort of off limits for you.
Well, you
it's
just said
rather
that I've
unfortunate.
fought to get where I've got.
Yeah, but
What does that make me?
well,
a
I
sort
don't
of proxy
imagine.
man or
I
something?
don't imagine that you've. Yeah, to some degree, I suspect you're not very agreeable.
So that's the thing. Successful women. I'm not very agreeable.
Right.
But
I've noticed that
successful-
actually in this conversation.
At least
and
we
I'm
can have a
sure
joke
it
about it.
served your career well.
Successful women, though, basically have to wear the trousers, in your view. They have to sort of become men to succeed, is what you're saying.
Well, if they're going
I've had to fight to succeed,
if they're
therefore
going to
I'm an
compete
honorary
against
man.
men, certainly masculine traits are going to be helpful. I mean, one of the things I do in my counseling practice, for example, when I'm consulting with women who are trying to advance their careers, is to teach them how to negotiate and to be able to say no and to not be easily pushed around and to be formidable. And you need to, if you're going to be successful, you need to be smart, conscientious, and tough.
Well, here's a radical idea. Why don't the bosses adopt the male bosses, shall we say, adopt some female traits so that women don't have to fight and get their sharp elbows out for the pay rises? It's just accepted if they're doing the same job, they get the same pay.
Well, I would say partly because it's not so easy to determine what constitutes the same job.
But that's because, arguably, there are still men dominating our industries, our society, and therefore they've dictated the terms for so long that women have to battle to be like the men.
No, it's not true. It's not true. So, for example...
Where's the evidence?
Well, I can give you an example very quickly. So I worked with women who worked in high-powered law firms in Canada for about 15 years, and they were as competent and put together as anybody you would ever meet. And we were trying to figure out how to further their careers. And there was a huge debate in Canadian society at that point that was basically ran along the same lines as your argument, is that if the law firms didn't use these masculine criteria, then perhaps women would do better. But the market sets the damn game. It's like...
And the market is dominated by men.
No,
so
it's
what
not.
I'm
It's
asking
not.
you-
The market is dominated by women. They make 80% of the consumer decisions. That's not the case
What?
at all.
If you're talking
80%.
about people who stay at home looking after children, by and large, they are still women. So they're going out doing the shopping. But that is changing.
They make all
Anyway,
the
what I want to
consumer
ask
decisions.
You, okay, so
the
what I want to
market
ask
is
you-
driven by
okay,
women, not men.
Right.
Okay, and if you're a lawyer
And they
in
still
Canada...
pay more for the same sort of goods. That's been proven, that men, you buy a blue bicycle helmet, it's going to cost less than a pink one. Anyway, we'll come on to that.
It's partly because men are less agreeable. Right, so they won't put up with it.
I want to ask you, is it not desirable to have some of those female traits you're talking about? I'd say that's a generalization, but you've used the words female traits. Is it not desirable to have some of them at the top of business? I mean, maybe there wouldn't have
They
been
don't predict
a
success.
banking crisis.
They
if
don't
that had
predict
happened.
success in the workplace. The things that predict success in the workplace are intelligence and conscientiousness. Agreeableness negatively predicts success in the workplace. And so
you're
does
saying
high
that-
negative emotion.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that female traits don't predict success.
But I didn't say that
and
intelligence wasn't. I
conscientiousness
didn't say that
do.
intelligence and conscientiousness
Well, you were saying that
weren't
intelligence
female
and
traits.
conscientiousness by implication are not female traits.
No,
I
I'm
mean,
not
that's very
saying that.
dangerous
I'm
territory.
not saying that at all.
Are women less
There's-
intelligent than men, by and
No,
large?
no, they're not. No, the data on that's pretty clear. The average IQ for a woman and the average IQ for a man is identical. There is some debate about the flatness of the distribution, which is something that James Damore pointed out, for example, in his memo, but there's no difference at all in general cognitive ability. There's no difference to speak of in conscientiousness. Women are a bit more orderly than men, and men are a little bit more industrious than women, but the difference isn't big. But
I know
that
plenty of-
averages into
Plenty of men
conscientiousness.
who aren't necessarily as
Well, of
industrious.
course,
But
these are- okay. But no,
female
but you
traits,
asked me
though,
a
why
question.
are they not...
Feminine traits,
Why
let's
are they
say.
not desirable at the top of... Feminine traits, why are they not desirable at the top of business?
It's hard to say. I'm just laying out the empirical evidence. Like we know the traits that predict success.
But we also know, because companies by and large have not been dominated by women over the centuries, we have nothing to compare it to. It's an experiment.
True, and it could be the case that if companies modified their behavior and became more feminine, that they would be successful. But
You
there's
seem
no
doubtful about
evidence
that.
for it. I'm not neither doubtful nor non-doubtful. There's no
So
evidence
why
for
not
it.
give it a go, as the radical
Because the
feminists
evidence
would
suggests,
say?
well, it's fine. If someone wants to start a company and make it more feminine and compassionate, let's say, and caring in its overall orientation towards its workers and towards the marketplace, then that's a perfectly reasonable experiment to run. My point is that there is no evidence that those traits predict success in the workplace. And there's
Because it's
this
never
evidence
been
is-
tried.
Well, that's not really the case. Women have been in the workplace for what? At least ever since I've been around, the representation of women in the workplace has been about 50%. So we've run the experiment for a fairly reasonable period of time, but not, certainly not for centuries.